Hello and welcome to another of my army painting videos. Today we're going to be painting Games Workshop's Goblins. Now I bought these Goblins in 2019 with a view to playing Age of Sigmar, which is why they're based on the round bases. But I'm now playing exclusively Kings of War, so this next lot that I've got to paint, I've just left them unbased. So I've built them up and then I've just stuck them down to a bit of blue tack so that I can paint them, and they're a lot easier to stick onto the base. The bases I've already built. This is a base for a horde of goblins, and I've used Geek Gaming Scenic Base Ready Mix, and I've got 10 of these left over, and there's going to be 30 on the base, so I've got 20 that I've built as bowmen, and you're going to follow me through as I paint them. So I've left this sequence quite long because I wanted to explain about dry brushing. So you've got a big brush, and I'm using Deck Town, which is an off-white. So I load the end of the brush only, and then I actually try and take almost all the paint off the brush. I use an old sponge, as you can see. I've been using this for years. People use paper or sometimes just the edge of the desk. But the idea is that you're trying to take as much of the paint off the brush as you can. As you can see, I'm just testing here to see if it's the right consistency for me. You want something which will deposit some paint on the raised areas of the figure, but it's not got enough paint that it's going to smear when it goes across the flat areas. Now I'm doing these purely for tabletop gaming, so there would be no point in me picking a colour which is nice and subtle, like a grey, that would show a gradual highlight. These are quite stark highlights, but you can see them from the from the tabletop. So it's just a case of using your brush and brushing in the direction of the details, really. So on the hoods, you try and brush up so you can get the details of the behind, and then on the robes you go side to side so that you get all the ridges. So you just work along on each figure until you've got all the areas highlighted with the dry brush that you want it to. It's a technique that takes a lot of practice, but once you've got it, it's fantastic for getting armies painted quickly. A lot of the army painting I do uses dry brushing. I even use it as a highlight sometimes. So once you've got them all dry brushed, you move on to the painting. Now there's not actually a lot of painting goes on these goblins, so get a nice detail brush and just take your time a bit. Make sure that when you're putting this flesh on, you're not painting the mouth, and you're not going off the flesh and catching bits of the robe, but generally there's just the face to paint and the hands. It's goblin green, and as you can see, I'm just using one layer. I don't thin my paints down. I know, you could see brush strokes occasionally, but I'm not bothered. I've done this next one as a time lapse. So I'm painting the bows. I'm using Cavalry Brown, which is quite a bright colour, but when you're using something for a tabletop, you want something to catch the eye, so these bows stand out. But I'm showing you what batch painting is all about. So I have 5 of these mounted on a ruler, and it's on my painting handle, and then I go along and I paint all the front of the bows first, and then I flick it around and I paint all the back of the bows. As you can see, it's actually even more economical if you're painting, say, a unit where they're all the same sculpt. Then as you go along, first where the bits you need to paint are on each figure, and you get used to, they call it muscle memory, you get used to brushing the same way. So if they were all the same sculpt, you can actually get quite quick by the end. But here I'm just working through, putting the bow on all of them, and as you can see, I've got 4 stands of these, which is my 20. I've got 2 of the previous ones I've painted there just at the bottom, just for reference, so that because they have to match, really. Yeah, batch painting, it's not for everybody, but I love it. I've actually painted some batches which have been 50-60 figures, Don't try that yourself first off, because it can be quite wearing, but certainly even if you're painting a squad, just paint the whole squad together. So now I'm going on with just a few colours just to break up the large black area of the robes. So I've painted the shafts of the bows, the arrows that are on the bows, and then I just paint the belt. There's a good view of the belt on the back, and then they've got the knot at the front. The next step is I'm going to put a bit of ink onto the flesh areas. So it's just a dark green ink, and you just apply it with an old brush, because inks can, damage brushes quite quickly. So I'm adding a little bit of details here. So I've gone with a white paint, and I'm picking out the feathers on the arrows that are moulded to the figures. Now I've actually used two different brushes here. I've used a fine brush for those feathers, and then I've switched it to an old brush to do the arrows that are in the quiver, because I'm almost dry brushing these on, so it's nice and quick. But I won't want to do that with my detailed brush, because you damage your brush. So it's always a case of using the correct tool for the job. So whilst I was doing the white, of course, it gave the ink a good chance to dry. So now I'm just going over and using the original flesh colour as a highlight. So I'm just adding it to the tops of the hands, the nose, the chin, and a little bit of the cheeks. You don't need to do too much. You're just trying to increase the contrast that the ink gave you. So we're really getting down to the last few details now on the figure. I've painted the lower lips in a purple colour. Again, it's just to give that little visual point. I also painted the teeth, but it doesn't show up very well on the camera. And that's them all done. I've cut off the ones that were on the round bases, and now I'm just sticking them all down to my already built base. So just a nice bit of super glue on the bottom. Now, because these are goblins and I want them to look like a rabble, I'm not putting them in any sort of ranks. I'm just positioning them quite randomly. And here you have the completed base. The painting of all 30 probably took me less than 3 to 4 hours. And for me, I'm happy to use that on a tabletop, and that's what's important for me. Some people wouldn't be happy with it, but I'm perfectly pleased. So again, thank you for watching. Hopefully you've got something from this, and if you have, please share the video.